So today we got a question from Big Surge, who said he's noticed this issue with hesitation in his game recently. He's getting ready for an upcoming competition. I think it's an MMA competition. And he's noticed this issue. By the way, I'm going to sort of talk about this idea just in general terms of combat sports. So whether it's jiu-jitsu, wrestling, boxing, anything, you could apply this to what I'm going to share later on. You could apply it to it. But he's noticing this as he's basically starting off his rounds where he's training, and he sort of allows the other person to take charge of the match. They end up sort of taking him down. He makes some mistakes. Something happens, and he's down in a bad spot. And then at some point in the middle of the round, a switch flips. He starts to sort of turn it around. His mind sort of goes from a place of being hesitant and worried to all of a sudden he becomes very aggressive, very offensive, and he starts to do very, very well. Now, what he wants to do is how can he channel that mindset right out of the gate and become more of a fast starter and to be more offensive in the very beginning? Now, I'll share some ideas on this, but I was curious with him. So I asked Serge, I said, man, what happens? Mentally, what happens where you feel that switch flip? What kind of experience is that? And he says that the issue is that he has this realization mentally that he's losing, and so there's no need to be hesitant anymore, and he needs to push the pace and come after the person. Now, Serge, the reason I asked you that is because that same thing that you're experiencing, that initial hesitancy, and then followed by this sort of this turning on and then doing really well in the middle of the match, that happened to me as a brown belt and a black belt. I've talked about this numerous times on the channel where I had a beautiful knack, which I don't say with pride. I don't say sort of gloating about it, but I had a knack for getting into these matches, and I would try to feel my opponent out, and I wouldn't take it to them. And in turn for doing that, they would typically sweep me or do something and put me 2 points, possibly 6 points in the hole if we were competing right out of the gate. And it was frustrating. I'll talk about MMA too as well because I know this is an MMA competition. But it put me 2 to 4 points or 2 to 6 points in the hole out of the gate. And then at some point in that match, a switch would flip, and all of a sudden I would come at them. And in a lot of cases, I won these matches where I started down in this huge deficit of points. And if I didn't come back and win the match, a lot of times at the end of the match, it was very close. I'd made up a lot of ground, and a lot of people were really impressed by that. But again, I didn't want to be in the same situation you are where you're sort of making that lost ground. I wanted to sort of take it to my opponents right out of the gate. But what for my issue was there was this kind of what-ifing going on where I would want to go for stuff, but I just didn't feel confident in what I was doing. So it sort of hindered my aggression and my offensive abilities. But then what would happen is as soon as I didn't care anymore because I was losing, then I would turn my brain off and just go. So here's what I did. I did 2 things, and I'll talk about the mindset part at the end because I really feel like a lot of times our mindset, our confidence, and our ability to be aggressive and offensive really starts with the physical, and then once we sort of gain evidence of our abilities with these particular techniques, it's easier for the mindset to be in place. So here's 2 things that I did, and this is also true with my MMA fights. I'll talk about those as well. So number 1 is that I started to focus on my opening techniques. What was I going to do in the beginning of my matches or my upcoming fights? That was important because just like you, I found myself in a really good spot when I was in the middle of the match, once things were going, but I didn't want to get to the middle of the match either behind on points or with my opponent in control. And so what I started doing is I started all of my rounds in jiu-jitsu on the feet, focused on just my opening techniques. When I was getting ready for a particular MMA fight, I would usually know my opponent, and I would kind of know what sort of techniques I was going to try to open up with, and I would try to use those as much as I could during sparring over and over and over again. You can sort of draw a parallel with this with chess. A lot of times chess players who get really into it, they'll develop a sort of level of mastery with a particular type of opening. And a lot of these openings, if you're not familiar with chess, a lot of them have names like the Roy Lopez or the King's Gambit or whatever it might be. They have these different names of these particular openings, and they get very good with them. And they change a little bit depending on if they're black or white on the board, but they have these openings. You kind of want to do the same thing, whether it's jiu-jitsu, MMA, whatever. You want to have your opening set. What techniques are you going to use from the beginning of the match? How's that whole thing's going to start? And then you want to use those as much as you can in live training so that you can develop confidence with them and develop the ability to use them, right? Second thing, as the fight comes closer, as the match comes closer, what I would do is I would just drill my opening techniques like hundreds and thousands of times. I wanted to do them over and over and over again because when the match started, I just wanted to be like a robot. Because once I got into the middle of the match, I was good, but it was that early part of the match where I was struggling because of the mental stuff, right? So I wanted to be able to go in there and literally just let my body take over and let my brain turn off. Because usually when my brain turned off and my body took over, I did better. And so that's what I did. I started to drill these techniques hundreds and thousands of times. Before any of my jiu-jitsu competitions, I was drilling like 3 techniques. Basically, my particular takedowns I was using and maybe a guard pull. For MMA fights, it was the same thing. I had a particular punching combination that usually led to a takedown, and that's what I was trying to get to. And I would drill those over and over and over again, especially in the last 2 weeks of the training camp. I would sort of lighten my training up, and I would just focus on the drilling part. And those 2 things gave me a ton of confidence in those moves. And again, just like I said, it programmed my body. Where almost it was like I went out there like a robot. I was just going on autopilot, doing what I had done hundreds and thousands of times in the gym leading up to it, and tons of times, dozens of times in the gym during live training. Now, what that did is allowed me then to be confident in it and be aggressive with it. Now, one sort of thing that I'll add into it with the mindset part of it. You've got to put yourself, I've talked about this numerous times on the channel, like for me, my best matches, my most winning sort of mindset is when I don't give a damn about the win. Because in my mind, I've lost the match if I'm not aggressive. Just like you, when you get to that point where you're in the middle of the round and you all of a sudden realize you're losing, if you don't go for something, you're going to lose everything. That's the kind of the mindset I put myself in because I haven't won anything. If I step on the mat, there's nothing to win or lose yet. Nothing's happened. We're just getting started. And I feel like a lot of people get too attached to the idea of winning instead of being like, I haven't won anything yet. I've got to go after this person. And if I'm not ultra aggressive, if I don't use my techniques to the best of my abilities, I'm not going to win anything. And that's kind of the mindset that I tried to put myself in because I had been there before numerous times where I was backed up against the corner, I was down points or in a bad spot and I just had to go. And so just like you want to try to take that mindset that you have when you're in a bad spot and sort of translate it to the beginning of the match and realize you haven't won anything and you're going to lose the match if you don't go. And so those things right there, mainly the physical things, use it live in training, drill it a ton as you're getting ready for it. And then when you're going, try to channel that mindset of being backed into a corner and just going and using your techniques to the best of your abilities. And again, you can use that idea whether this is MMA, jiu-jitsu, or whatever. So Big Surge, good luck on your upcoming MMA competition. And guys, hopefully that helps you. I'll talk to you next time.